Okay, hi guys. So I'm not tech savvy. I still don't know how to override my voice over a PowerPoint. So I'm just gonna post my PowerPoint with my video. Um, so studying cognitivism, I use my metaphor as learning to drive. Um, so just following my PowerPoint, I went over cognitivism and its traits as existing schema or experiences, encoding, storage, and retrieval of the knowledge that they learn, duplicating the knowledge and applying it into new situations, and just having problem solving and reasoning objectives during this entire process. Um, so, just quickly comparing Piaget and Vygotsky from the readings. I said that Piaget had 4 stages of development and mainly focuses on how children are able to learn differently upon different environmental interactions. And I said Vygotsky was based on the zone of proximal development, so basically knowing what a child is capable of in doing on their own and with the help of others, and the importance of social interaction in order to learn, so what they can learn from others. So starting the explanation of my metaphor, I learned to drive in Connecticut, so I know it's going to be a little different, which I'm going to apply in my school role later on. But learning to drive in Connecticut, I had to study for my permit test first and pass it on a computerized test. So I said that was my receiving information part. So studying for the permit test, you learn terminology, the signage, all by looking through your driver's ed book and gathering information that way, but not being able to implement all of this knowledge until you pass the test and get to drive with a parent. So I said that was a part of the processing and interpreting information. And that's also a part of your specific schema. So just knowing that each state has different laws. I said that also applies to which or how child's going to have different experiences with driving. So the processing or encoding information was being able to drive with the parent, so implementing what you know, when to yield, when to stop at a stop sign, understanding who is the right of way. And I lastly said that the storing information was kind of just trial and error, so like regulating your speed, knowing the laws, proper signage. Sorry, I live right next to the road. And just getting used to the road. It's like an initial reaction now. You don't have to think about stopping at a stop sign. You know what that means. So continuing that, I said schema is using your learned rules to the road specific to your state and applying them to drive when you're by yourself. When you assimilate, it's using what you know in order to adjust to new situations. So I said avoiding an accident by knowing when to hit your brakes and how fast to hit your brakes, or to pull off to the side of the road to avoid it. So it's the same information, but it's applied in like a new situation. And accommodate, I said basically it's like learning to drive somebody else's car that you didn't learn how to drive in. So when you're only used to your own, you still apply the baseline knowledge of like the rules of the road, but you just have to know that a car could run differently. So like the example I said, like your brakes could be more sensitive, or their windshield wipers are a little more like dulled. So I kind of use that as that part. So in reference to the zone of proximal development, what you can do on your own, I said studying for the permit test, reading your driver's ed manual. What you can do with help, this came after the step about like getting your permit, is I said your parents are still legally supposed to sit in the car with you as you learn to drive, but they remind you and give you pointers on safe and attentive driving, all while you're still learning yourself. But you still have that aid when you're starting to drive. And then I said like learning from others. Parents obviously guide you when they're sitting in the passenger seat. Teachers can be the driving instructors at your local driving school. I know that I went to one of those, and that was another social interaction that I learned how to drive from. But I said your peers can be one of two things. I said your peers could be those if you attended a driving school that they were the others in your class. And then the other part, I said your peers were just others on the road in general. You learn by watching others as well as interacting with them on the road. So I know when I was at driving school, I sat in like the back of the car, like while the other person was finishing. So they would drop me off at my house and I would get to see them drive too. So I would have more social interaction that way as well. In reference to Piaget's stages of learning, and like working your way up, I said you're starting from studying and just learning based on words. You don't learn based on your actions yet. But you're learning based on how much experience you expose yourself to after that. So knowing that you're going to start on your own, and then your mid-ground is going to be learning with a parent or driving instructor, and the ending point is learning on your own. And there's always more to know, like learning how to drive stick or getting a different type of license. But you're always learning from other drivers around you. So there's always that level of learning, or the clear levels of learning. So starting with studying, having the aid and instructor, and then ending on your own. I said the role of a teacher, the point of our parents and driving instructors is to make sure help us make our knowledge applicable to each situation. So when you start from studying from a book, we expect the same end result of having and being a safe driver, but the middle learning process will be different for everyone. So when you first start to drive, you start to learn what a child is able to do with or without help based on the person that they're learning from, whether that be their parent or the instructor. Like learning to parallel park or back into a spot rather than parking normally. And that can be just like working their way up through the stages, developmental stages. They're going to know how to do things a certain way before they're introduced to new ones. Sorry, that was kind of confusing. So like when you first learn to park, you're going to pull in right away. But again, like the next stage of learning there could be parallel parking or backing into a spot on a busy street. I also said the role of a teacher is just knowing that a kid could fail the permit test at first, or getting into an accident. The role of a teacher is just basically best prepare a child for these situations, just knowing that they can happen. There are possibilities that these could happen. And I kind of incorporated that into the assessment part. So straying away from the literal assessment of taking a permit test, I said, once you're used to driving, there are going to be accidents. That's your assessment, is to test what type of driver you are. Or there's going to be obstacles like drivers under the influence, and all of these things are going to test your capabilities. And we just hope that the role of a teacher is a huge part in preparing us for that, and a parent. Family and community role, I said this is mainly where interaction comes into play, where parents and driving instructors are going to model driving for their children every day. Even like in the car growing up, before you even think about driving, like you get in the car and you're sitting next to your parents, you already know what type of drivers your parents are. Like I know my dad is just like the worst driver, but always tells me that I'm just like him and I'm the worst driver, but I know my mom's the better driver. So the biggest part of the community role is how children are going to learn how to drive based off of others in the community as well, not just people that they're willingly wanting to learn from. So they're going to have to observe and see other people get into accidents, and that can be a positive and a negative reinforcement. They could see people being very fast-acting learners where they can swerve off, or they can see people who are very negative, and they are going to be exposed to both. So the social justice and equity part I kind of had a hard time coming up with. I said it's knowing that some children will not get the same experiences and opportunities. Some children don't have an independent car aside from what a driving school would offer, or like they can frequently practice in. The only time they get to practice is at school or with that instruction. But I guess what the best preparation we can do is just to try and give them the same information to work with, and hopefully that will best lead them to when they do get the chance to practice as much as they do. But it's just knowing that we have to extend maybe more resources or more not more knowledge, more resources to others, and just knowing that each child isn't going to get the same experience. So that was it for my metaphor, and hopefully that made some sense.